Well, we have a great group of alumni joining us today virtually from around the world, and thank you for your participation. We greatly value your interest in learning about what Trinity-Pawling is doing during this pandemic, and a special thanks to our trustees and volunteers and leadership donors who are on this call today. We're especially appreciative of your leadership at this time and your confidence in the school. You will all be muted during the webinar, but may post questions using the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. And I see many of you figured it out and letting me know that you could hear me, so thank you. You can also let us know if there are further technical issues on our end. And at the end, we're going to share and answer questions after Headmaster Taylor has given an overall update on the school. And thank you to those who have submitted questions in advance. And then with that, I will turn the microphone over to Headmaster Taylor to share the state of the school.
Thank you, Regan. It's nice to be with you all today. I want to thank you for your time. But mostly I want to thank you for your connection, your support, your engagement, your leadership. I often say to the students, there are two schools at Trinity-Pawling. There is the school that up until a few weeks ago existed here and now on campus, in chapel, in the classroom, in the dining hall, on the athletic fields, the day-to-day experience of learning and growing. But then there's also the school that exists in the lives of the school's alumni and past parents, people who have a connection to the school that is very deep. And it's essential that both of those schools are nurtured and nourished. And it's essential that both of those schools stay connected one with the other, because they are both interdependent. The students need to know that they are a part of something much bigger, and that when they graduate, they will still be connected to Trinity-Pawling, and connected in a much deeper, much larger way in many, many respects. And then similarly for its graduates and past parents, there needs to be a sense of continuity, that the school today is still their place, of their place, of their recollections, their experience from the past. And there needs to be continuity. There needs to be interchange between those two schools. Now more than ever, we need that continuity. I was on a Zoom call last night for admissions. We had a sort of one of our revisit sessions, which we've been doing this week and last week. But last night I was on a Zoom call interacting with 4 different prefects. One from the class of 2016, class of 2018, 17, 18, and 19. But Miles Martin, who was class of 2016, I said, Miles, I've been thinking about you. I've been thinking about everybody in your class, because Miles is a senior, and he's just lost his college graduation, and he sort of smiled, and I said, how are you getting through that? He smiled, and he said, you need to continue putting a lot of thought into commencement, and it needs to continue to be a very special memory and event, because now that's the only commencement I'm going to really know. But I said maybe there's a way for the class of 2016 and the class of 2020 to come together, because your class of 2016 has lost its college graduation, but the class of 2020 has lost their Trinity-Pawling graduation in the way that you remember it. And he said, I'd love to be a part of that. So we need to find ways to bring everybody together. And these seniors in particular are so right now in need of connection, and they're connecting with one another, they're connecting with their teachers, but they particularly need to know that they are part of a larger brotherhood, a larger collection of Trinity-Pawling folks. So the state of the school. We're obviously going through a collective crisis, not just Trinity-Pawling, but we all are. Every organization, institution, every person meeting tremendous challenges. I was just on a webinar with other boarding school heads, and we were talking to psychologists who work with schools, and one of them, Rob Evans, has written extensively about difference between problems and dilemmas. And headmasters, school administrators, parents, so forth, we all are constantly faced with problems, and we're used to dealing with problems. Problems ultimately have solutions. And Dr. Evans reminded us all that this situation isn't a problem. It's a dilemma. And dilemmas don't necessarily have immediate solutions. They require coping and continuity in attitude and so forth. So we're working through this dilemma. We're confident, we're courageous, we're informed, but I also learn from the past. I'm a history teacher. I study history, and I'm well aware of the school's history. And this school has endured great challenges, great dilemmas through its history. A year after this school was founded, in 1908, there was a tremendous financial crisis in this country that hit the Northeast particularly hard. Dr. Gamage had just started the school 10 months before. The enrollment was probably, there were probably 40, 50 students, maybe a little bit more. And then suddenly there was a tremendous financial crisis. And the perseverance that he and the faculty at that time put forth to endure through that crisis and to move on. 10 years later, 1918, the school and the country dealt with the Spanish flu, and that impacted the school. The year after that, World War I. Then there was the fire of 1929, and followed the year after that by the onset of the Great Depression. And then, of course, World War II. And the Pawling School did not survive World War II. It closed, reopening in 1947 as Trinity-Pawling. There was the fire of 1969 and the tragic loss of a life of a fireman. The 1970s saw tremendous financial hardship. And I'm reminded of Phil Smith's courageous leadership in the early years of his headmastership. It was leadership of courage and steadfastness as the school debated whether or not it could survive. And Phil and the board at the time, we're steadfast. No, we're gonna get through this. There was the crisis of September 11th, and then the financial crisis of 2008. Now, I have been a school head during 9/11. I've been a school head during the crisis of 2008. Obviously, I'm a school head right now. I'll tell you that this feels much different than those two tremendous, tragic crises, 9/11 and the financial crisis of 2008. This feels different because it is different. It's more widespread, it's more encompassing, and there, it seems more that it's going to be more drawn out, and at least until there's some scientific and medical conclusions and discoveries brought to bear. So those are challenges. But in the face of those challenges, we need to look to the foundations upon which we're grounded as a school. And in the face of a dilemma, you look to what is beneath your feet. And for me and for the school, you look to to how the school was built, the philosophy upon which the school is built, the values that Dr. Gamage brought to bear when he created the school, values such as a commitment to hard work, to effort, to integrity, to being focused on the spirit, what he called the spirit of each boy, which I translate into recognizing each boy's gifts and talents, and recognizing that their growth as human beings and our obligation as teachers is dependent upon our ability to, number one, let each boy know that they have gifts and talents. Number two, to help them discover what they are. And number three, to nurture and nourish those gifts and talents so they blossom and grow. Those are values that were at the school at its founding, and that value is very much alive in the school today. Another value that is a sustaining value for the school is the central role that community plays in the life of learning at Trinity-Pawling. And we feel that even more profoundly today because we are not all together in one place. I was speaking with the prefects this morning, and you know, as I've been doing 2 or 3 times a week since this crisis began, and I could tell that today, you know, they're happy to see each other. But one of the prefects said, you know, I'm struggling. I want to be at school. I want to be there. And you know, and I said, what you're feeling is grief, and that's a normal emotion. But we're going to get through this. There's another side to this. But this, you know, what this is reinforcing for everybody is just how incredibly important the dynamic of togetherness is in the learning that takes place in any school. But the sense of space at Trinity-Pawling is its own catalyst. And when you take that away, there is a sense of loss. But I know it's going to come back. So when I look to how we're managing our way through this crisis, I am buoyed by the incredible durability of these values. You know, I know a lot about schools, independent schools. I've spent my entire career in independent school education. I've been fortunate to be head of 2 wonderful schools. And I can tell you that it's not common to have the durability of an educational ethos and a school mission. It's not common to have that durability go on for over 100 years, as it has at Trinity-Pawling. Most schools, you know, zig and zag. They can look very different 20 years later from the experience from 20 years before. This school has had 3 different iterations. The Pawling School from 1907 to 1942. Then Trinity-Pawling, with its connection with Trinity School in New York, from 1947 to 1978. And then Trinity-Pawling as an independent board entity from 1978 to now. Those are 3 different iterations. Yet these values have remained consistent through that entire period. There are some schools that don't have different iterations, and yet their values have changed over the time. Their mission has changed over the time. So I take strength in that. I'm uplifted by that continuity, that durability. And I have faith in that is going to help see us through to the other side of this. And I know from talking to the students today, and I know from talking to the many of you and other graduates of the school, that these values have become important components, foundations in your own lives as adults. So that gives me tremendous confidence that this school is going to come through this, it's going to weather it, and it's actually going to get stronger. I want to give you an overview of the timeline of the past 4 or 5 weeks, because I think it's informative perhaps on your knowledge of what we're doing now. On March 3rd, the school published travel guidelines. If people were going to be coming from other countries where there were high rates of infection, they were going to have to self-quarantine and so forth. About 3 weeks before that time, we had already, or 2 weeks maybe, we had already sort of said anybody coming from China could not come to campus unless they've been in the United States for over 2 weeks and they could demonstrate that. So we began preparing for this pretty early on. But on we published that on March 3rd because spring break was coming up, and we knew that people were going to be traveling and coming and going. We have students from China, we have students from other parts of Asia and other parts of the world, of course. And we knew that people were just going to normally travel. So we had to build in some protection. We had, in late January, we had decided that for the boys that we have from China or South Korea or Taiwan or Vietnam, that they and their families may not want to have them travel back to Asia. So we had made the decision in late January that we were going to allow international students to stay on campus during spring break, which we did. We had 30 students begin spring break with us on campus. So we had anticipated trying to be a helpful resource for these families. On March 6th, March 5th, I got on a plane from San Francisco and took the red eye back to New York, landing in the early morning of March 6th. Got back up to campus. I was able to be at an assembly by 10 o'clock that morning. And I was able to wish the students a very healthy and happy spring break because they were leaving at noon on March 6th. And I knew that we were going to have 30 boys still on campus. But as you would imagine, there was tremendous elation. When you start spring break, there was a great sense of energy. The kids were excited. they were excited to leave. They were excited to get off campus. Um, and, and, there was a great sense of energy that comes with that. No one thought on March 6th, and when we said goodbye to everybody as they got into their cars or went on trains or planes, that they wouldn't be coming back. No one even thought that. On March 9th, that next Monday, I had a faculty meeting. By then, just 2 or 3 days later, we had begun to realize, there may be some families who are uneasy about their kids coming back. Maybe they don't want to get on planes. So on March 9th, we announced to the faculty, you need to have 2 weeks of work on your website portal in case students are going to be delayed coming back. On March 9th, we had about 15 boys and 2 teachers go on a trip to Scotland and Ireland. And it was supposed to be a week-long trip. And they safely arrived in Edinburgh on the morning of March 10th and had 2 wonderful days in Edinburgh before the presidential travel order having every American come back to the country was issued on March 11th. So the company that was facilitating this trip said, we got to get you back. And the only way to get them back was to go through Germany. And so they flew from Edinburgh to Munich, had to spend the night in Munich, and then flew back to New York, arriving safely. But because they went to Germany, and Germany at that time was a level 3 country in terms of its safety from the virus, they had to self-quarantine when they got home or got back to campus, which they did, and they were wonderfully cooperative about that. The next day, March 12th, we made the decision to delay the spring term until April 13th. We made the decision that we would be teaching remotely from April 1st to April 10th. So that seemed like it was a very quick decision. Things at this point were happening very, very quickly. It was a remarkably fluid dynamic, as you all know. On March 17th, the Founders League heads, we met and we made the decision that there were going to be no sports played in the spring term. Remarkably difficult decision. In hindsight, it seems like an easy decision, but at the time, for an athletic league to sort of say, oh, we're not going to compete, very difficult. But after we were talking it through, it seemed inevitably logical. By March 18th, I had come to the conclusion that there was no way we were going to get this term in. After wrestling with this and looking, reading and seeing what the experts were saying, I was saying, I can't imagine bringing anybody back into a situation where they would have to be potentially quarantined if they got this virus. It wouldn't be responsible. I worked with the executive committee of the board and share with them with what I was feeling, and they agreed that would not be a responsible thing to do. So that was March 18th, but we made the decision we weren't going to announce that decision until March 20th. So we had 2 days, and I did not share the decision with anybody else. But I mobilized the administrative team to sort of saying, we need to plan for what this would look like if that decision has to be made. We need to figure out an academic schedule. We need to build a whole array of resources. We need to develop protocols. We need to assess our technological infrastructure. We need to be able to have a communication vehicle in place for if this decision gets made, that I want to have all that in place. So March 20th, 2 days later, we publicly made that decision. But because of the hard work of the administrative team that was working on this, we had a depth of resources at our disposal, because we had done nothing for 2 days, or really just a day and a half, of putting together these resources. So when we announced this, we had a remarkably rich array of resources that you can find on our website. And I want to thank this administrative team that worked on this. I want to thank our communications office that worked on this. We had people who were just, collaborating. They were being creative. They were energized. And so when we made this decision, we were able to inform our students and our parents of an incredibly difficult decision for them to come to grips with, but we gave them resources and we gave them a plan. We had an academic schedule in place and so forth. So what did that look like? We created a process for inquiries to be made. We created a form where parents, students could ask questions. We had a communication team that could answer those questions by subject. We created a process whereby students could get their academic materials. We had people going into rooms and getting books, computers, notebooks. We packed them all in boxes and shipped them off, starting on March 21st. We had a process for assessing people's technology needs. What kind of computer do you have? How old is it? Do you have a tablet? Are you only using an iPhone? What's your internet like at home? We were prepared to actually help families get internet if they needed it. But fortunately, everybody had it. But we assessed all that. And I want to give a tremendous shout out to our technology team. We've got some very, very sharp technology people who were just outstanding at helping us to create this. We had to assess our own technological capabilities. Did we have enough bandwidth? We got more bandwidth because we knew we were going to be having to use it. We needed to figure out an academic schedule, which we did the days before. We chose to use a combination of what in EduSpeak now is synchronous time and asynchronous time. So synchronous time are times where the classes come together through this Zoom technology. I taught a class earlier today that was a Zoom class. We also created blocks that were asynchronous, that were blocks that the students could preserve in their daily schedule to get work done. And we provided guidelines for the faculty saying that any work that is due needs to be due at the end of the asynchronous block. And we did that so that we could, we as teachers could know if we were being successful at delivering the content. Because there's something lost, of course, when you're not sitting in a classroom. So when I taught today, I had already read the students' work that I had assigned from Monday, and it was due Tuesday. And that work was designed to make sure that I knew that they really understood what we were going over and what they read. And if I needed to reinforce some points, I did that today. because I could see what they were working through on their asynchronous blocks. This schedule allows for specific virtual community. We have chapel in our schedule twice a week. It's voluntary now. There are no attendance checkers in chapel, but on Monday's chapel, which is sort of a chapel / morning meeting, we had over 200 people in it. People want to be there. We have time in the schedule for clubs. So our clubs are meeting. The newspaper is meeting. We've got a fun called the Coffee and Tea Club. And so they're meeting and they're talking about the coffee they're drinking. We have a big ideas club now where the chaplain is meeting with anybody who wants to be there to just talk about big issues, because we're now all dealing with big issues. We had to come to a standardization of language around what we're doing. You won't see on our website, I hope you don't, any reference to distance learning. You'll see remote learning, because we don't want to be using the word distance in our lexicon. We know we're distant from one another. We don't need to remind ourselves of that. In fact, we want to find whatever ways that we have through technology to limit that distance, to bring people together. We created lots of resources for parents, how to manage work with children through times of anxiety and stress. We have wellness. We have a wellness time built into the schedule. We actually have an exercise block. And kids are using, we've got a group of students that are sending out workouts. Coaches are sending out workouts and things like that. All of this you can see on our website. And I encourage you to look at it. We spent March 30th and 31st in professional development days with faculty, but the faculty who have been just outstanding through this, even though they were technically on spring break, once we made the decision that we were going to be teaching remotely for the first 2 weeks and then for the whole term, the faculty sort of began gearing up. We gave them lots of information on how to use Zoom and how not to use it, what works with remote learning and what doesn't work with it, so they could begin to plan. And they've been very creative. And on April 1st, we began teaching. And so we're more than a week into this. And of course there are challenges. The dynamic of the community is missing. There are technology challenges. Hopefully I'm coming through all right on this and there aren't too many lags, but that happens with technology. The internet's stronger than at times than others. As educators, we're dealing with the irony, the frustrating irony that we are the ones who've been telling kids for years, you're spending too much time in front of a screen. Get out, be outside. Don't walk around looking at your phone or your computer. Stop playing so many video games. That's, we've been preaching that. Now we're telling them, hey, let's get together on screen. We're going to teach using screens. That's challenging for us as teachers. We have challenges of time zones. But I was hearing the other day that, we have a boy who's from Japan, and he was in his 2:00 p.m. class on Tuesday. And the teacher sort of says, oh, you're here, because it's 2 a.m. in Tokyo. And he sort of shrugged and said, well, I had nothing better to do. We've got kids who would sometime, have to be woken up to go to chapel, and they're getting up at 6 a.m. because they live in California. And they're in their 9 o'clock class. So we're dealing through those time zones. I want to, well, I'll come back to the students from Asia here in a minute, but we're dealing with the challenges of lack of predictable structure. We're dealing with the challenges of finances. As you might imagine, some families are saying, okay, I want a refund for what we're not getting. And I get that, I understand it. People's finances are stressed. But most of our costs are fixed. We don't hire teachers by the month or by the term. So most of our costs are fixed and they've already been committed to. There's going to be some savings, if you can even use that term, when it comes to food costs, perhaps. We're not going to rent coach buses to go for the lacrosse team to go to Choate. So there's some costs that we will not incur, but they're not, those are not significant in the grand scheme of things. So we're dealing with those challenges of the finances. And of course, wrapped up in all of this are the unknowns about next year, and the unknowns that have to be given clarity by science. When we'll start school? How will we start school? When will we have athletics? We don't know those things yet. I mentioned this is a dilemma, and that we're working our way through. So there are lots of challenges, but you know what? With any challenges, there are also tremendous opportunity. And we've already seen what those opportunities are because they're manifesting themselves. We're seeing remarkable creativity on the part of faculty, on the part of students, on the part of families. People are being highly creative. We're thinking about things in new ways because we're forced to. That's liberating. That's going to allow us to be better at what we do when we're on the other end of this thing. Remarkable exercises in adaptability. I mean, I went through that timeline. It's staggering for me to even think about that. We were adapting, hour by hour. That builds tremendous fortitude in the long run. So there's, that's going to be an opportunity we're going to lean into in the future. I spoke in chapel the other day that a hidden gift in this whole thing is the opportunity to deepen our resiliency. And you're seeing the resiliency of kids. You're seeing the resiliency of teachers. And resiliency is a remarkably important and valuable characteristic for the health of our lives. And this exercise is an opportunity, this whole crisis is an opportunity to build resiliency individually, but also organizationally as a school. And we're doing that. And then, there are opportunities to be reflective. I asked the prefects last week, I said, how has Trinity-Pawling, your experience at Trinity-Pawling, prepared you to deal with this particular crisis? And their answers were wonderful. They said things like, we're a family, and I'm relying on that family more and more. One of them said, Trinity-Pawling teaches you, excuse my language, teaches you how to embrace the suck, which is language that I remember from my own high school years, where we would encourage one another to suck it up. Bad things happen, you have bad days, suck it up. And so this student said, embrace the suck. Some things aren't going to be good. You get through it. And similarly, another one said, we learn how to persevere. We've learned that at Trinity-Pawling. We've learned how to work hard. And we're applying all of those things. We're a community. And they all said, I have a deeper gratification for what the teachers have done. and the role that they play. And so those are all opportunities. I mentioned we had 30 boys who stayed on campus for spring break. These are boys primarily from China and other parts of Asia. And once that decision was made on March 20th, we worked very hard to help facilitate their departure. And not all of them could leave. So we still have 4 students on campus, and they have the entire campus to themselves. They're working on getting flights, but the flights are limited, as you probably know or could imagine. But their attitudes are tremendous. And you know, they're boys, they're teenage boys. They're cooking out hot dogs, and you know, they're still playing tennis and things like that. And they're being supported by the faculty who are there. Not all the faculty are there, but most are. But we're all, you know, there to support one another. So that's the end of my comments. I apologize for their length, but you know, a lot going on. But I'll happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, Bill, this is Cluett talking. Can everyone hear Cluett? Can you hear Cluett?
Yes.
Great, excellent. So you talked a little bit about technology. We got several questions in advance also about technology, and you talked a little bit about how we're integrating technology now. We've got questions about how online technology, how online education will change instruction into the future, and will we incorporate some of these lessons we're learning now into future technology?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for those of us who are educators, you know, we've had experience with remote teaching and learning before. Most of us, because you know, we've done a professional development exercise. You know, we've had meetings and so forth through Zoom, and you know, it can be remarkably convenient. Not to have to, I'm on the board of the New York Association of Independent Schools. And, you know, when have a board meeting, I don't have to go to New York City for a 9 a.m. meeting. I can participate through Zoom. So it can be convenient. But I tell you what we're all experiencing when we try to teach class after is it's not, you know, it's not the same at all as teaching in a classroom. I had a class today, as I mentioned, and I was able to deliver the content, you know, hopefully clearly, hopefully well, but it's very difficult to engage. I mean, you know, students are looking at a screen the way I'm looking at a screen. You know, I, as a teacher, can't, you know, I get a sense of their, you know, their engagement by just looking at the screen, but it's not the same, and there is something lost. And every student with whom I've spoken understands that. And so, you know, a gift that'll be on the other end of this is a deeper appreciation for the fact that learning takes place best when it is done in relationships and when it is done in community. And, you know, technology is not going to replace that. Now, as I mentioned, I teach a class, and I've used not necessarily Zoom, but you know, when I'm traveling, you know, when I miss 4 days being on campus, I have my students working. I mean, they're communicating with me. They're dropping papers in the portal, and we're able to keep the learning process going. So the technology is a useful tool. It's never going to replace what we do in the classroom.
So tied in with that question, we got a question about what are TP's needs in the technology area?
You know, I think, you know, I think the school's needs are to make sure that we keep updated with technology. And, I can tell just in the various meetings I'm having with colleagues, their connectivity may be weak through Zoom. And that's, that could be an internet issue. Most likely it's a hardware issue. If people are using a computer that is 4 years old, it probably, is not going to be as effective. I started this whole process on a laptop, and the laptop kept dropping me off of the internet. Obviously that's unacceptable, but the laptop was 5 years old. And it couldn't meet the needs. So I think with our needs in technology, if we have older equipment, we could use newer equipment in some cases.
Okay. Ben, going in a bit of a different direction, question about the seniors and how they're doing with this year's college process and how this experience may have affected them.
As I mentioned before, the seniors are having a deep sense of loss in what they know they've lost already. There was a petition that was formed early on in this. I think after I had announced that we would be delaying our break by 2 weeks, and right as I was announcing that we'd be closed for the spring term, the seniors started a petition begging me to reconsider so they could have their graduation. And I wrote to them and I said, first of all, I hope you all sign this petition, even though it was said I really hadn't thought this through. Fair enough. Sign the petition as a class, be unified. I get it. So they have that sense of loss. In terms of their college, most of them had this all, they're all done with their applications. So that happened a long time ago. Most of them, have applied early decision or early action, and they've known where they're going to go. Some of them are waiting until their notifications come in April. From other colleges that have that late notification. But even those students have been accepted to other places already. So everybody sort of has a place to be. And, they're in the process of deciding what place it will be. And we're supporting them, of course, through this whole process. The juniors are probably the ones who are understandably, more anxious about the college piece than the seniors, because the juniors are wondering, oh, how's this going to impact my grades in my spring term? Well, I can't take the ACT or the SAT. Those of them who are in AP classes, the APs have gone from being a 2-hour test to now a 40-minute test that you can take at home. It's a totally different experience. And so the juniors are wondering, well, what is that? How are they going to regard that score? What are colleges going to think about grades? The grades for the spring term are going to be different. And what we're saying to them is, listen, colleges all understand what this is. It's not going to be, you're not going to have some college sort of say, oh, well, boy, your spring term or your junior year looks a little different. What was going on there? Everybody knows what was going on, but we're having to reassure the juniors.
Now, in terms of admissions, how is admissions going for next year, and what do you expect?
So there's two questions there. How is it going, and what do I expect? The first one. Right now, it's going well. We're ahead. Our numbers are ahead of where they were last year. Admissions is one of those offices where we can actually track data and compare it year after year. And so we're ahead in terms of how many acceptances, how many contracts are coming back, from this date today compared to this date a year ago. So that's comforting and reassuring. What do I expect? I don't know. I don't know, all of this is going to be dependent upon about, so many factors that are out of the school's control. Some of them are going to be ultimately in the school's control, but I don't know how this is going to impact other people's finances, people who thought they could afford this. When they inquired, when they visited, when they applied, will they still be able to afford it next year? Don't know. I've developed several different contingency models, all of that, with admissions, a driving force on all of this. But so we're working hard. We've had revisit opportunities last week with accepted families. We've had one Tuesday night, last night, tonight we'll have another, and those have gone well, and the feedback has been positive.
Great. A question about the level of growth in endowments. Can you share a little bit about how the endowment has grown?
Sure. Endowment is, has been a huge part of my focus. I can tell you that in 1980, the school's endowment was $200,000. 20 years after that, the school's endowment was $16 million. And 20 years after that, in 2020, the school's endowment, as of 3 weeks ago, was a little over 50 million. So the school's endowment has been growing. We just completed the Scully Challenge. As you all know, Bill and Marlene Scully have been remarkably and heroically generous to the school over the years. Donated money for the Smith Fieldhouse, but with a challenge, and that is, you need to go out and raise $10 million, build the endowment by $10 million. And we completed that challenge last June. And so that happened in less than 4 years, raising $10 million for the endowment. And I'm so grateful to you all who have helped us do that. The endowment is the future of the school. It is the lifeblood of the school. It's the school's foundation. That has been, and it's going to continue to be a prioritized focus for the school. And we hope that, it's probably taken a hit with what the stock market has done, but I can assure you that it's invested through the wisdom of a group of people on the board who know exactly what they're doing with this, and it's it is invested very wisely.
And then just looking ahead, we had a question about how Trinity-Pawling is addressing the employment of some of the staff for the dining hall services and maintenance staff workers.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody asked that, because those have been priorities for the school. We are, through Governor Cuomo's executive order, we are at a highly reduced workforce, but we've extended people's paid leave. The maintenance crew is sort of working. Half of them are coming in on one day, the other half's coming in on another day. Housekeeping, the same is true. So we're keeping people engaged and employed, and we're committed to doing that. The Culinart staff, that Culinart is its own separate company, of course, but we told them early on that their treatment of their employees was a high priority for the school, because they are members of our community, even though they work for a different company, technically. But the students and the faculty don't, we don't see any distinction. They might as well be working for us. So we let Cullinart and the executives there know that was a priority for us, that how they were going to treat their employees, and they've been treating them very well. They're same type of thing, sort of extended leave, and I'm sure that those folks are being assisted through unemployment and so forth. And now with this the new paycheck program that Congress has passed, there's more and more people doing that. But we're reaching out, and they're trying to keep the community together.
So we have about a minute left. The last question we have right now is, can you talk us through what appears to be medieval weaponry on display as your backdrop, and whether or not the more involved DC meetings take place there?
What was the last part of that?
Whether or not the more involved disciplinary committee meetings take place there.
I love that question. I love the opportunity to laugh. This is a collection of antique tools, farm tools, kitchen tools. Some of them go back to the 1700s, 1800s. Yeah, some of them do look like weapons, and many of which probably could be used as weapons. But my father started this collection maybe 30 years ago. And then got sick of having to dust them all, and so put them in a box. And when they moved from one house to another about 20 years ago, well, he started the collection maybe 50 years ago, and he gave it to me 20 years ago. And so this is my office at home, and it's a good reminder for me of connection with my father.
So on that note, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being on this call today. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up, or please follow up with us and let us know if you have further questions that we can try and answer for you as we go through this process. So thank you to all. Thank you, Bill.
Oh, thank you all.
And with that, I will end the meeting.